Hi, you're with Chandeep at Goodly once again, and in this video we're going to talk about that how can you combine data from multiple Excel files into a single Excel file. Now this is one of the most common things that people end up doing in Excel. They have to create a master data, meaning they have to combine data from multiple smaller Excel files together to a main bigger Excel file. That's what they have to do, but they end up doing in a manual way, which is where they will open up every single Excel file, do Control C on the data, and then in the main file they'll do a paste, and then open another file, Control C on the data, and then paste. Now in Power Query you can actually automate that. So let's just see how can we just first of all create a master file, or let's say a consolidated data from multiple Excel files. But secondly, more importantly, how can we also automate this process so that we never actually have to do that again? All right, why don't you take a look at the screen? I have a folder here which is actually called a shared folder. In the shared folder I have a couple of files here. I have year 5, year 6, year 7 and year 8. These are actually the files of my interest, but because this is a shared folder, other people have also kind of kept in their stuff in this folder as well. So you can see there is a couple of Word documents, another Excel file, maybe a bitmap image, another text file, things like that. So I actually want to discard all those files and keep the files that I need. And also maybe if I get 2009 file in terms of automation, that file should automatically be included while creating the master data. All right, so why don't you take a look at, I'll just open one of the files and show you what it is, and then let's just proceed. Okay, so in terms of data, this data is really simple. I have opened year 2005 file. We have a date, we have sales rep, we have customer, amount, profit, and the region. 6 columns, straight, simple, nothing too complicated. Now, as of now, to begin simple, I'm picking up a case study, which is where all the 4 files, year 5, year 6, year 7, year 8, all of them have the same data structure, meaning same columns all across, no confusion in the data, no errors, nowhere, so on and so forth, right? The only thing that is different in the files is that the row data could be different. So here I could probably have January dates of 2006, and all the dates could belong to 6, 7 or 8. The sales rep could be different, the customers could be different, amount, profit, and the region, so on and so forth, all right? But the headers, the structure of the data is absolutely the same, the sheet name is the same, all of that stuff. All right, so why don't we proceed and let's just see how could we do that. So you can see that I just closed the file. For us to be able to do that, like consolidation of the data, you don't even need the files to be open. So let them be closed at a particular folder and we'll fetch them using Power Query. Now one thing is that currently I'll be using Excel to kind of do the automation, combine the files from multiple Excel files. But you can also do that in Power BI and using Power Query. So you know that Power Query is in both Excel and in Power BI, which is exactly the same. But for now, I'm going to use Excel, and maybe for other examples in the future, I can use maybe Power BI. So I'll kind of switch between Excel and Power BI. All right, take a look. So in the data tab, we have get and transform, and this is where all the tools and the options of Power Query lie. So I'm going to click on get data from file from actually a folder, because I have to pick multiple files from a folder. Now this option may not be available in case your Excel is not updated. In that case, you will not have a get data drop down. You might see a new queries drop down in the data tab. All right, so just watch out for that. So from file, from a particular folder, and it asks me, hey, which folder is yours? So I can actually click on the browse here. You can see there's going to be a browse right here. I can click on the browse, or maybe I can just paste the path of the folder directly. So what I'm going to do is maybe copy this folder path, Control C to copy, and then come back down and then paste the path right here. And I'm going to say okay, and it will start to read the data. Now what this is going to do is this is going to give you the list of all the files that are possibly there in that particular data. So you can just see that in this data we have a couple of these files, but we also have a hidden file. You can see that we have a hidden file. Don't worry about it. Power Query will automatically handle that. So we have a bunch of files. These were the actual files which were there in that particular folder. Now let's say, for example, if these were the only files in the folder, they would not have in any other file. I have a very easy option here, which is to just combine the data from all the files and just keep it in front of you. But let's just kind of go inside Power Query and take a look at how the Power Query functions, because not only we have to remove these junk files that we actually don't need, but we also will learn a bit about Power Query, how it looks, how it works, and stuff like that. So instead, I'm going to click on transform data, and I will come here in the Power Query editor. Now, like I said earlier, Power Query has a separate window on the top. I mean, you on top of Excel that opens up. Until the time this window is open, you would now not be able to work with Excel. So I have to kind of close this window to go and to be able to work with Excel. All right. So in the Power Query window, you can see that we have all these Excel files and the names and all these PowerPoint files here. So let's just start to clean the data. You can see that we have a first step here, which is get the data from a source, which is nothing but this source, this folder path. And now let's just start to create our query. All right. So the first thing that I'm going to say to Power Query is that, hey, Power Query, I'm looking for only Excel files. And you can see that as one of the columns here, we have an extension of the file, which is where I'm just going to say, hey, why don't you pick up only Excel files? So just click here, say OK, and we have only Excel files, right? Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say Power Query. You can see that we have a lot of these files, but there are 4 relevant files, but there is also one irrelevant Excel file, which is new Microsoft Excel worksheet. So I don't really want that. Now, one option is that if I go to the name drop down and if I can uncheck that, that means that I'm manually checking mark the 4 files. So that means check mark 5, check mark 6, check mark 7, and check mark 8. That is totally okay for now. But the problem is when I add 2009 data the next time, the check mark will not automatically happen again. So I have to kind of play smartly to kind of get this done. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come to the name filter here. And in the text filters, I will say that the file name should begin with year, right? So I'm just going to say begins with the word year. Now that's the mandate that I'm assuming it to be. So my file names will always begin with the word year. So I'm going to say begins with, and I'm going to write year here, and I'm going to say okay. And to your surprise, what happens is that nothing actually shows up here in terms of filtered data. At least I would have expected to see 4 files that were actually beginning from the word year, but I actually see none of them. The reason is because the word that I wrote here, year, where the Y was small, but actually the files contained Y capital. So one of the biggest learning that I want you to take away from this video is that Power Query is highly case sensitive. So case sensitive in terms of formulas that you write, the columns that you refer, the tables that you mention, all of that, the values that are there in that particular data set, all of that is highly case sensitive. So year Y small and year Y capital for Power Query are 2 different words. Later, maybe we'll take a look at that. How do you kind of get around this problem? But for now, you have to understand that Power Query is highly case sensitive. So I'm just going to come here and maybe just do it again. So I'll delete that particular step, come back right here, and I'm going to say, hey, name begins with, and I'm going to say, hey, why don't you start with the year? And this time my Y is capital. So this is absolutely fine. And I'm going to say, okay. And you can see that I only have the relevant data in front of me. Now, actually, I'm not interested in the name of the file. I'm just interested in the data inside of that file. And you can see that next to the names and all these columns that I have got, which are actually the properties of the file, I also have a content column, which is actually where I can see binary. Now Power Query converts every single file to a binary. That's what it calls it. So these are nothing but files. If I just maybe click on the side of this empty space here next to binary, I'll even see the preview of the file at the bottom. So you can see that this is a 5 file, it's a 6 file, so on and so forth. So this is the data that I want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the content column and right click here and then say, hey, why don't you remove all the other columns and just keep only this column? Because now I have applied filters to my data set and I have kind of extracted the files that I need, and those are the only files that I want to actually combine. So I remove the other columns, which was just the names and the properties and other stuff, and I just start working with this. Alright, now I'm just going to click on this double arrow right here which says combined files, nothing too complicated. So I'll just click on the arrow. Now as soon as I do that, Power Query goes and starts to read that file and it's going to ask you a question. Okay, I'm ready to combine the files. Could you give me an example of how your data looks? So I'm going to say that, hey, why don't you maybe take a sample of the data from the first file there is in the folder. All right, so you can see that it's asking for a sample, and I can say that my first file could be taken as a sample because all the other files have the same data set. I mean, it's the same columns, right? And where is the data? It's there in sheet 1 in every single of the file. It's there in the first file, it's there in all the other files. All right, so first file sheet 1, and I'm going to say okay. And what this is going to do is it's going to pick up data from sheet 1, all the columns that are there in the first file, and just combine it together, and you will have a look at that in a moment. All right, so the data is combined. Let's just come back to home. And now that the data is there in Power Query, I can actually load this data back to Excel and I can start working with this data, the combined data. So I'm going to go to home and I'm going to say close and load. So close and load, and the data starts to load in my Excel. Just going to take a moment, and you can see that the data has been loaded. So why don't we take a look at the date column right here, and we'll see that do we have all the dates right from 5 until 2008 or not. So I'm going to click here 2005, and we have 5, 6, 7 and 8. This is beautiful. Actually, we haven't really tested for the second thing, which is where if I drop in another 2009 file in that particular folder, does it auto update or not? Because that's the reason why we were doing it, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open 2008 file real quick, and I'm going to add a column right here, and I'm going to add 365 days to it, make it a 2009 date, drag it down, and I will maybe call this as a, no, let's just copy this and then paste it right here, and then delete this column. Now I'm going to save this file not as year 2008, I'm going to save this file as year 2009 in that folder. All right, so this is the folder. I'm going to save this as year 2009. I'm going to say okay and save, and this gets saved. I'm just going to close that. Now let's just take a look real quick. You can see that we have a 2009 file. Now I'm imagining that this file is going to come from somewhere, and I'll just dump it into the folder, right? So now let's just go back to our Excel and let's just start to refresh the query. So right click on the query, and then I'm going to say refresh, and let's just see what happens. And you can see that it has actually loaded 753 rows. Let's just take a look at the date column, and we have 2009 data along with us. All right, so this is beautiful. Now you must be kind of wondering and asking me a question that currently the data structure in all the files is the same. What if the data structure is the difference? What if I have a different column in one file and a different column in the other file? Or a different second valid question could be, hey, I was only working on sheet 1, but what if I have 2 or 3 sheets, or maybe if the sheet is not named as sheet 1 in that particular folder, then how do I combine that? So we will obviously take a look at all those problems maybe in the next video, and even dynamic columns and other kind of problems in the forthcoming videos. But this is just a taste of how Power Query looks, how Power Query works. So we will now in the forthcoming videos automate a lot of stuff using Power Query. Real quick, if I actually take a look at the query that I have designed, so this is the query which is poorly named as shared folder, which I can also name as all data. So I can go here, I can rename this as all data actually. And if you take a look, we have done a couple of steps here. So I go pick up the data from the source, apply filters for an Excel file, apply filters for year equals to 2009, and you can see that we start getting 2009 file, and a couple of steps here, and then we eventually reach to the end of the data, which is where we get all the data, and then we close and load this. Now when you run this query again, when you hit a refresh, all these steps happen once again on that particular folder, and you get the output. Voila. All right, let me know if you have any questions around this. Please do practice and put your questions in the comments if you have any. In the next video, I'll talk about that in case you have extra columns in maybe 1 or 2 Excel files, how do you handle that extra column anomaly? So maybe I'll just kind of junk up my data, and let's just see how do we handle that in Power Query. All right, thanks so much for watching this. I'll see you in the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.